Ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, very much welcome to this early morning session. I am impressed to see so many of you up in this hour. And I hope we will have an interesting session. We have got a very, as I see it, a very interesting headline. And as you know, the headline is the role of FDI in building physical infrastructure and competitiveness. And we have got a very interesting panel with people from the public sector and from the private sector with a very broad and long experience regarding FDI, foreign investments in infrastructure, and its importance for competitiveness of regions and countries. We have thought of disposing this panel in the following way, that we will have from the panelists opening statements, then we will have a discussion in between the panelists, and after that we will have a discussion between the panel and the audience. So it's you are very much welcome to make statements or to come up with your questions. We all know that foreign investments in infrastructure is extremely important for a country and for the competitiveness of a country. And some of the aspects that we would like to cover today, that is what can governments and what can corporations, private industry do in order to make these investments as successful as possible. And a special area for discussion here will be PPPs, public-private partnerships, because there are mixed experiences, so the question is also raised there, what must be done to make them successful? Another question that will be discussed is within which areas of regarding infrastructure, physical and non-physical infrastructure, are the most interesting ones for the competitiveness of a country. That varies, of course, from country to country, but is it within transportation, or is it within technology, or healthcare, education, and so on? There are very, very many different aspects. And last but not least, we will look into the political risks, and we will discuss some tendencies and challenges when it comes to foreign investments within infrastructure. So that is how we have thought of disposing this panel. And since we started 10 minutes late, I think that we can finish 10 minutes late. So there we are. I would like to give the floor first to Niraj Agrawal, who is the CEO of Crescent Enterprises. Niraj has spent more than 35 years here in the Emirates. He has got a very solid and long experience when it comes to FDI. And his company, Crescent, and I will not present that company because that you do much better yourself. But let me only say that it is an important company with some 7,000 employees operating in 21 countries. So may I please ask you, first of all, to say, because it's your experience is based on what you have been doing over the years with Crescent, and then put forward two questions to you that you could open up with, and that is, first of all, when we talk about these investments, we all know that it's not a question of capital alone. There are many other things which are much important. And as you see it, and with your experience, what can governments do in order to make these investments as successful as possible?
Okay,
Please.
sure. I have, what, 5 minutes?
4 minutes.
Okay. All right, okay.
Because we are many on the panel, so I have to be a little strict with you.
No problem. So, well, good morning to all of you. My name is Niraj, and I represent a group which has been here for 40 years. We're a homegrown group, but now operating in 21 countries, so certainly I would call itself a conglomerate. Our business is oil and gas production, port and logistics, power plant construction, healthcare, investments, and we also have a ventures business which incubates startups. So fairly broadly diversified. Our footprint is mainly in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa region, but we also now have operations in South America and North America. So with that, I think the theme keeping FDI in mind is at a big picture level, just talking about the region first of all, the region has fundamentally changed in the last 40 years. Before, government was the principal party building the infrastructure. It was on the back of high oil prices, where both the financial reserves and the liquidity was there with the governments to build the infrastructure. Over the last 5 years, the world has completely changed. And we see a world which is not only making the GCC governments focus and realizing that the revenue base is based on $50 to $60 oil, but also a realization of shale oil as well as renewables being a part of this. Now what that is doing is, it is making the governments realize in the region that they alone cannot build the infrastructure. They need to move from being an investor and creator to a facilitator and enabler. And that's a major shift in the role that has happened within the region. Now what that has done is, it is slowly forcing the governments to realize that they need to create a more friendlier environment, stability of regime, consistency, mainly to enable investors to have a certainty and stability of cash flow. FDI and infrastructure is typically very distinct from trade. You normally need a 15 to a 20-year horizon. So if the region needs to attract investment, it needs to have policies that can give confidence to the investors that the policies will not change over a 15-year period. Now, I think the region has been very good in adapting to the change. Dubai, in particular, passed a PPP law in 2015. In UAE, in particular, I think the governments have been very receptive to the idea of listening to foreign investors and bringing about changes that are necessary to make this happen. So that's sort of one theme I think we need to think about, and we'll discuss more. The second theme that I want to talk about based on our own experience is that the region alone is also now slowly exporting skills and knowledge. And we are seeing that through our own businesses. We set up a port in Brazil. We also set up a port in Florida. And it wasn't because money was needed. It was because we were able to demonstrate that skills and knowledge could make a difference. And you think of US, you think of a fairly advanced economy, but in reality, their problems are no different than the problems of the region. You look at what's happening in North America and Europe now, actually the political risk is not very different than what's happening in emerging countries. So it's a very important shift, if you like, in terms of perception of risk from a political perspective. I think I'll stop here and go on. And
I just have one follow-up question to you, and that is that we all know that the Emirates have been and are very successful, and you mentioned the the legal framework. If you were the ruler of the Emirates, which one action would you take in order to still improve the environment here?
Okay, it's a very good question. Can I reflect on it and answer it?
You reflect on it.
I will answer it.
Good.
Next, right?
Yeah. I won't let you get away. Good. So our next speaker is Imad Mubiri. You are the director of the Investment Promotion Agency of the Sheikhdom of Ras Al Khaimah. Very much welcome. You have got a broad experience also. And we have already said, and I know that you stress that very much, that the importance of FDI within infrastructure in general. But more specifically, could you please tell us why you think it's that important?
First of all, good morning, everyone. I'm humbled and privileged to be part of such a knowledgeable panel. I think I would not say I'm the youngest, but I probably have less experience than all my peer colleagues here. This is said, I would like just to maybe introduce who we are and what we do. So I'm the business development expert and investment promotion director for the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Ras Al Khaimah. We're a not-for-profit organization, a semi-government organization. We are the second oldest chamber in the UAE after Dubai. We exist since 1967, and nowadays we account for more than 40,000 in the whole Emirate, 40,000 companies, where 32,000 alone are registered with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. What we do is that we facilitate we facilitate business, we host delegations, we try to convey and promote the overall economy of UAE and Ras Al Khaimah in particular as part of the 7 Emirates. Now this is said, what I personally do is I try to be as much as I can an enabler, helping, being the in-between party between the private sector and the public sector. We help convey the right message, and we produce data and information with the help of the Studies and Research Department at the Chamber of Commerce. We also issue some statistics and numbers so as we measure the performance of our local economy, and we try to also do what we call the assessment of our performance versus what is done elsewhere in other parts of the world. Now, when it comes to infrastructure, I believe that not only our region, but the whole world is faced with challenges. The subject is complex and maybe broad subject. What we can say is that as part of the competitiveness of any economy, one basic fundamental pillar is infrastructure. The World Economic Forum has put or set a number of indexes where economies are, or by which economies are measured, or economic performance of a country is measured. So when it comes to infrastructure, certain sub-indexes are there to measure this specific pillar. So infrastructure, we can take roads, we can take the quality of roads, transportation, land transportation, air transportation, amongst others. Now, overall, the maybe economic economic figures around the world would maybe take as a criteria for measurement the transportation, the land transportation criteria for infrastructure as a measuring tool for others, or to implement a model as a model to implement it for others. When it comes to UAE in particular, and because it's a young nation, I think it has been recording very high scores, specifically in terms of infrastructure performance. In the 2007 World Economic Forum Global Index results, actually overall UAE has ranked 16 over 138 countries in terms of score overall. When it comes to infrastructure, it ranks number 4. In terms of quality of road, it ranks number 1 in the world, number 2 for air transport, and many other very good performances or very good performance indexes that measure how performant the UAE is. But this is because, you know, many may argue and say that this is because it's a very brand new infrastructure. It's a new installation. So what would be the challenges in maybe 20 years to come? Are we planning enough? Are we building for the 21st century?
Okay, Matt, shall we,
Okay.
we come back to the challenges.
Okay.
Thank you so much for underlining the importance and giving us some hard facts here. And I can just underline that we all know that when it comes to attracting FDI, we know that there are some basics. In some countries, they don't even ask about infrastructure because they take it for granted that infrastructure should be there and should be excellent. And that goes for some barriers too. Now I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Baba, who is the president of the International Chamber of Commerce in Malaysia. And I'm very happy to see you on the panel, because once upon a time when I was the president for Invest in Sweden Agency and the president for the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, WIPA, we had a very good cooperation. So I'm happy to see you here, and the question that I would like to forward to you, and also to you, that is a little to elaborate upon your experience in Malaysia and Nigeria as regards or the difficulties comes to the FDI investments within structures in your country. Mrs. Baba.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and very good morning to all. I'm happy to be here under my new, well, not really new, about 2 years. I've been the president of the International Chamber in Malaysia, and we are also a member of the International Chamber of Commerce worldwide. And we are the oldest chamber in Malaysia that has been ensuring that the industry will grow in Malaysia and also in support of the government policies. So I've had 35 years of experience in attracting investment when I was working in the Malaysian Investment Development Authority from the lowest level until I become the Director General of MIDA. So we have had a very good experience in attracting investment and what it needs to be done in order to be at the top in terms of the eyes of the investors. So definitely we started industrialization way back in 1970s when we attracted the American companies to invest in Malaysia, especially in the electronic companies. So companies like Intel, Western Digital, you name it, they were all in Penang in Malaysia. And they have contributed in terms of infrastructure development in order to support FDI into Malaysia. Now, this is where we saw the importance of having the right infrastructure in order to support foreign investments in Malaysia in terms of manufacturing, and later on we went on into supporting the services sector. So what is important then, over the years, we have also developed the local industry, Malaysian industries, to support, to become vendors and suppliers to the FDIs coming in. So I would say that in order to attract investment, foreign direct investment, as well as to retain them, to keep them to be continuously interested in investing in your country, you must have all the prerequisite in retaining them, not only to attract, because sometimes they come and go and they move to other countries surrounding your own country if you don't keep the competition. So therefore, it is important that you also have enough number of efficient local industries to support in terms of suppliers and vendors of components and other services, and also the port facilities. So in a nutshell, the supporting factors for industries to grow and FDI to continuously interested to stay in your country and the new ones to come in and invest in your country would be the cost of doing business, the ease of doing business, transparency of rules and regulations, especially in doing business in our countries, and friendly government regulations, and whether there is a door that is open in the various government departments to hear the problems of the investors and to address the problems. So in a nutshell, these are very important, and I'm sure we have discussed this in WIPA many times about how do we attract investment and how do we retain them. And nowadays, the government, I think about 30 years ago, Malaysia has started going into PPP, that is private-public partnership, in terms of building the infrastructure, which I think we'll discuss later.
We'll come back to the PPPs.
All right.
So much. And Mr. Ushe Uri, who is the CEO of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. And we all listening to your experience when it comes to FDI within infrastructure in your country.
Sure.
Please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I will speak to our specific experience in Nigeria, and I will also speak to the organization that I run, which is the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, which was set up to do two things. It was set up, number one, to invest internationally. We invest 60% of our assets internationally. We invested currently across 17 countries, across many instruments, and that is supposed to bring in savings and returns. But then we also invest 40%, or 40% is earmarked for investments in the local economy, in infrastructure. And the way we set it up is to make sure that 40% is used as a platform to attract other co-investors. So one of the first things that happen in an emerging market, particularly in a market like Nigeria, is you come in looking for somebody to partner with. And so our organization is set up, and one of the rules we wrote is that we do not invest alone. When we invest, we must make sure we bring investments from the private sector. And so there is a platform that's been set up to attract FDI, and that is especially in infrastructure, and that is in the organization that I run, the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. At the moment, our assets under management altogether, including third-party assets, is just over $2 billion. Now, when I look at FDI, there are three things I probably want to speak to. The first thing that we have experienced, and we're in about 4 or 5 different projects at the moment where we have foreign participation, is that FDI brings discipline. It brings cost discipline, it brings private sector philosophy to investments. One of the investments we were involved in, when we brought in our partners, we were able to reduce the cost by more than 20%. Now, if the government was running it directly, obviously the cost will overrun just because of not having the structure to impose a cost discipline. So we understand that. The second thing we observe with FDI is that most African countries have come to realize that, and most countries in the world today realize that the government cannot fund the necessary infrastructure. So you must provide a platform for other participants to come in. And the third thing we see is sustainability. After you've made the investments, how do you ensure that the investment is maintained and ensure that the necessary investments continue to make it profitable? And this is the one thing that private participants bring in, and particularly foreign direct investment. There are many areas today where I think we see a lot of successful FDI investments in Nigeria. I'll probably speak to 4 at the moment. The first is agriculture. And it's interesting when I look at agriculture, and I hope that we see a lot of opportunity for mechanized agriculture in a place like Nigeria. At the moment, and people don't realize this, Nigeria is 180 million people. The country is probably 3 times the size of the United Kingdom. And whenever the headlines about Nigeria is talked about, people think about terrorism. The reality is that the whole Boko Haram and all of that is in a small area of the country. There is a much bigger aspect to the country that people don't realize. The second thing is that we have 90 million people under the age of 20. That's an interesting statistic in the sense that you can see a lot of investments going into areas like IT, which I'm going to speak about in a minute. But when I look at agriculture, the reality is that we have a huge domestic demand. Nigeria is the gateway to 450 million people in the ECOWAS region. So my sense is that we expect to see more people come into this area. We have arable land, we have all sorts of things. My organization at the moment is involved in making fertilizer, for example, affordable on time and at a cheaper price. There is room for mechanization, significant mechanization. So this is an area where we see a lot of opportunity for partnership with foreign investors in warehousing and all the structures necessary for agriculture. The other area where I see is we want to make sure that we provide a platform for superior manufacturing. And one of the things that is being the focus of this government in Nigeria today is to make sure that free trade zones work for oil and gas, for trade, for manufacturing. So that's an area where we are also involved and we're starting to see opportunities coming. And I'll mention two more areas. Off-grid power is an area for investments. And then finally, I'll talk about IT and entertainment. Now, this is an area where I think many people have not looked at, but telecoms is an area in the country that's doing extremely well. Entertainment, IT. We at the moment believe that there is significant opportunity in a place like Nigeria to partner to provide even more access to internet. It is very expensive and quite profitable if you look at it the other way. It's almost 6 times as expensive per megabit to buy data in Nigeria as it is to buy other places. I see opportunity for competition and for investment. So what are we doing about it? We're creating vehicles. One of the first vehicles we created is a co-investment partnership with Old Mutual for agriculture, $200 million. We seeded it with $25 million, and we are raising the remaining 175 with Old Mutual. The second thing is infrastructure for real estate. We seeded it with $100 million. We're raising $500 million in partnership with Old Mutual to try and attack real estate and commercial real estate. We're looking at off-grid power. So from my personal experience, and I can speak more to it, Nigeria is ready for co-partnerships. We have a vehicle in place. We have an organization which is designed to attract this and create an environment to make it work. And finally, the government is working on an enabling environment council to make it easy for businesses to set up, make it easy for people to come into the country, visa on arrivals are working. So there are all sorts of things, that is going in cadence today, and I think it's quite an opportunity to come to a place like us with our organization.
Ushe, thank you so much for your interesting information here. Now I will turn to, I thank all the panelists for your introductory remarks, and I think we have got 3 themes now that we will try to go through. One theme, the first one that I would like to ask you about, that is that we know that the importance of FDI within infrastructure. However, we also know that there are very mixed experiences in different parts of the world. And that goes also for one part of FDI in infrastructure is the PPP solutions. Some PPPs are working very well, some are not working very well. There are delays, there are controversies, there are many difficulties. There are cost overruns and so on and so forth. So my question now to the panel is actually, if we look into the efficiency of foreign investments in infrastructure, physical and non-physical, and PPPs, what you see as the most important measures taken by governments on the one hand side, by private industry on the other hand side, in order to make these investments successful and to overcome the difficulties that many countries and regions experience today. So please, so that we have got the time to go through our 3 themes, don't make the answers too long. Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll give it a go.
Please. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that Malaysia has embarked into public-private partnership way back about 35 years ago, when we realized that there is a need for a good infrastructure to support investment, whether it is FDI or even domestic investment. And then the prerequisite for PPP would be to look into what it should be, whether it is road or Wi-Fi network and all the other components of infrastructure. So of course the first item that we prioritized was the road system, because this is to support connectivity. Without infrastructure, without connectivity, no investment will happen, will take place. So therefore, the Malaysian government has decided on this reason. One is for connectivity, for investment, infrastructure to support the industrial estates that was planned, and also for social economic reason, meaning to modernize the villages and so on to become cities. So that because you need cities to be modernized, or villages to be modernized into cities to support livability of people, as well as to attract investment, whether from internal or foreign investment. So therefore, we have actually embarked on PPP to build a road system, highways connecting the east and the west coast of Malaysia and the north and south, meaning connecting from Singapore up to the southern part of Thailand, and from Kuala Lumpur, the federal capital, to the eastern part of Malaysia. And the other PPP project that we focused on was on the building of industrial estates. So now we have about more than 30 industrial estates, good industrial estates spread all over the country to support investments that come in. So without the proper industrial estates with complete infrastructure, no investment would come in. Yeah. So all these were planned many years ago, about 35 years ago, whereby the government invested a portion of the prerequisite of in terms of dollars and cents, and also in terms of policy to ensure that the partnership will go well. Then the private sector comes in with investment in terms of monetary value and also their technology. So there would be several reasons why PPP would be formed. One is for funding. The second is for proper policy monitoring. Third, to serve the right purpose, that is to host investments and to ensure connectivity is well, so that in and out of the country is easy, and also movements of goods and services within the country is made easy and cost less because of the efficiency of the movements of goods and services. And also the placement of the local industries. The local SMEs are spread all over the country, then they were moved to be nearer to the source of the demand.
Good.
Yeah? So these were the types of planning that the country did, and we have been very successful, whereby we have built new highways with toll system, and concessions are given to the private companies that partner with the government for 30 over years, so that there will be mutual benefit for the government, for the country, as well as for the contractor.
Thank you.
So they collect toll services, they charge, but then there will be concession to be paid to the country. So I see this as a win-win situation. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much. We will continue.
Sure. So,
Thank you.
So, I mean, I would say that within the Middle East region, most of the basic infrastructure in terms of telecommunication, roads has already been built. The challenge now is on building the next level of infrastructure, which traditionally has been built by the governments. The governments in the region now are increasingly realizing that the financial resources are not there anymore to build it themselves. So going back specifically to your question, what is really required to enable these capital flows to happen? And I think to assume that the world will change overnight is not going to happen, you know. And I think unlike emerging markets or growth markets, which have had to do it almost as a must to completely revolutionize the way they've done, within the region, it's in some ways a coexisting model where the government will continue to invest in what it has been done traditionally, but gradually over a period of time create space for the private sector to come in. And you know, some of the ideas would be to start opening up the brownfield sector, where the brownfield projects are first opened up for private sector, to enable private sector to take that risk, to put in capital. Now, the capital in the region has traditionally been available for no more than 5 to 7 years. And the infrastructure projects typically require a 15 to 20 year mindset. That can only happen if the projects are brownfield and not completely greenfield. The second thing which is required hand in hand with inviting FDIs is a bankruptcy law. The bankruptcy law, for example, in the UAE has been on the cards for many years, but it's not yet been passed. Particularly for the SME sector, businesses will be formed and some of them will fail. But a big fear for new people to come in and set up businesses is the fear of being penalized by the law if their businesses are not successful. The US, for example, has a Chapter 11 creditors protection provision, and a bankruptcy law would enable that. So that not just needs to happen within the UAE, but it needs to happen throughout the region to be able to enable this to take effect. And the third thing, which I think is very, very critical, more than capital, to really create a regional organization similar to MIGA, where the investment is protected for political interference or political risk. You know, you typically come in and take a big bet on a project on the basis that your rights on the project are protected for 15 or 20 years. But after you've built the project is effectively de-risked, right? The cash flows start. And if the government starts interfering with it, either in terms of introducing taxes or diluting your rights, an organization like MIGA, equivalent to for the region, will help you protect that as an investor. So those are the three key things I think would make a difference.
Very good. Thank you so much, Nazar.
Yes?
Please, and then.
Yes. I would like just to maybe add on what Mr. Niraj has just said. I think, to my view, it's also defining the role of what the government or what the private sector has to do and what the public sector has to do in terms of defining the role, in terms of what is the role, what are the responsibilities for each and everyone in terms of when investment is in, how are we going to, or where does it go? What are the sectors? What are the priority sectors? We take the UAE for instance. You know, there are not only in the UAE, also all over the world, the infrastructure, part of it. Let's say we take an example as the telecommunication as an example. It's a sovereign sector. It cannot be 100% governed by the public sector. So it's really important to define the role right from the beginning. First of all, which priority sectors we are going to try to attract FDI into, the legal frame, the way we are doing, let's say, we're tendering and bidding for projects, trying to identify what are the risks investors might encounter in a specific country. So I believe that for the PPP to work in an efficient way, roles has to be defined first and assessed right from the beginning. I'd like to give maybe some of the floor.
Thank you, Mad. Usha, please.
Sure, thank you. I think when you go into a PPP, it's important to understand that you're going to business with government. Yeah? And so you need patience, you need persistence, and you need a little bit of political savviness, yeah? So, because you're going into business with government. And I will point to three things in our experience. One is the process of deal development takes a very long time in a PPP. You know, we were involved in a road and bridge project, and 3 years in, we're still doing deal preparation. Because at the end of the day, you're going to take a 25 to 30-year concession. And that is something you need to be sure is done properly. You must make sure that when you are in these economies, you try and compensate the people to the highest possible standards. It's very important. The reason is because it's easy to take the local environment standards and pay compensation. The truth is people are not going to be happy, and you don't want that because that can stop your project. Because if you're building a road or building a bridge, there is no value to a half-finished bridge. You must make sure it operates. The third thing is, across governments, you must make sure that the rules around your investment is rock solid, because you're going to transition from one government to another government to another government and make sure that these things work. So the rule of law is very, very important. But this is, I'm speaking from practical experience, as we go into this. The final thing I think that really people worry about, especially in emerging markets, is the fact that most of the PPP projects, even the brownfield that you're describing, are sort of almost greenfield. So you must be able to have the patience to build something in the markets like ours. PPP is an evolution of the privatization program that started in the 80s. Government started out by selling all their assets. Margaret Thatcher started it. And after selling all the assets over time, the government now started going into partnerships with people. And this is how it's evolved. Thames Water is PPP. Heathrow Airport is PPP. So that is how these things have evolved. And this is where we are. Now, there's a point you raised, which I thought was very interesting. And this is the point about insurance. Yes, MIGA provides a little bit of that. We believe that an organization like ours, which is a government-sponsored entity, which is also with private sector philosophy, in a co-investment environment helps provide a little bit of that. But even one step higher, the first thing we realized were to make PPPs work or to make infrastructure investments work in our market, we needed to create a bond market, and we need to create a bond insurance market. So if you look at the United States, one of the things that was very important in driving private participation in infrastructure were the emergence of the likes of AMBAC and MBIA, who provided a credit enhancement for the bond. We don't have that until now. We created one. So a few weeks ago, we just launched a company called Infra Credit. The role of by law, we cannot provide guarantees. But in partnership with Garantco, we created this company. And the role of this company is to provide bond insurance, credit enhancement for bonds for infrastructure. I hope it works out, but it's an attempt on our side to solve the problem that you identified. So emerging markets like ours that want to get involved in this must create that type of entity. The bond market is the most important market for driving infrastructure. The second thing it does is we found out that there was a big disconnect between the pools of capital and the opportunities. So pension funds, insurance companies in Nigeria do not invest in infrastructure. They buy government bonds because it's cheaper, it's easier, it's more profitable. But pension funds have 20-year money, 30-year money, 40-year money even. Because in an economy like ours with 90 million people under the age of 20, with a working life of another 40 years till 60, you can actually invest their money for 20, 30 years. So the challenge was, how do we bring that money into infrastructure? And this was why we created this company, Infra Credit, to provide bond insurance. So the point I am making, and this is a sales job for Nigeria, the point I'm making is that all of the pieces needed to make sure this works are in place. We hope that people will come along with us, but the ultimate thing that my organization provides for you is that partnership. It's that partnership that helps you navigate the politics. But when you're coming, please be patient, because it's going to take a while for these things to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would now like to turn to our second theme, and perhaps we have to keep it quite briefly to go to the third one also. And the second theme, that is, I would just, we know that foreign investments in infrastructure has been very much a question about, for example, roads, ports, and so on and so forth. But today, what would you say are the most important investments, foreign investments in infrastructure from a competitiveness point of view? Is it still physical investments, or is it more technology, healthcare, education, digitalization perhaps? So where do you see the upcoming most important foreign investments serving, strengthening the competitiveness of a region of a country?
Should I go? Sure. So this is a very interesting question, Kai, and I would directly sort of respond to it by saying both Dubai and Abu Dhabi have shown the world the lead in renewables. And Dubai is a very good example. You know, if you looked at Dubai 5 years back, less than 5% of its energy need was coming from renewables. 95% was fossil fuel. And today, when it projects the future, 75% of its energy need is coming from renewables. So that is a terrific example of adoption of technology in bringing solar technology to the region. But from a competitiveness point of view, it has set a world record in terms of cost per kilowatt hour, which is, you know, being talked about across the world. And Abu Dhabi has actually followed suit from Dubai by creating Masdar. And actually, they have now set up a PV plant, which they're talking about, which is going to be even cheaper than Dubai. And they're also now bidding within Dubai for Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park. So it's a great example of adopting technology in a competitive way, you know, adopting, learning, improvising, and really setting a world record in terms of how it could be done. The other areas where we are seeing changes taking place is car sharing rides, Uber and Careem. Uber came to the region, Careem was an example of local adoption. In Saudi now, one of the biggest cluster of passengers using it is women, you know, and that's a great example of how technology is enabling a change. Similarly, online shopping is enabling women to buy goods at home in Saudi, rather than having to visit a particular place and then receive the goods. I mean, this is bringing about a change, if you like, in terms of adoption of technology. The other areas where we see changes coming is healthcare. Healthcare is a very, very important area. And the next stage would be manufacturing. You know, the region has recently now realizing the importance of manufacturing. There was just a conference that was held in Abu Dhabi recently, and I see that as a next big level of change that will happen. And typical in terms of what UAE has done, it brings a technology, improvises it, and then aims for world best. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Imad?
I would like to go to the maybe initial point and stress on the fact that priorities. I believe that we cannot lay down fiber optics if the fundamental infrastructure is not there. So depending on which stage or on which stage the a country or a region is, should be planning for the future and seeing the nearest demand or the nearest what do I need now. I just give an example of UAE in numbers. In terms of infrastructure investment, Dubai alone is investing in the next few years 43 billion US dollars into infrastructure. The overall infrastructure investment in the UAE is worth 549 US billion dollars. For Abu Dhabi 2030 vision, they are investing around 200 billion US dollars, of which 58 billion US dollars goes to roads and bridges. This is part of a plan. It's part of a vision. So when it comes to separate emirate, I'll take an example of Ras Al Khaimah. Ras Al Khaimah is focusing on its ports. We've got 5 ports. We'll never compete with Dubai Jebel Ali Terminal 3, but still, because of strategic positioning, and its manufacturing potential, we've got more than 35% out of GDP of Ras Al Khaimah. GDP is from manufacturing. We've got more than, as I said at the beginning, 40,000 companies, of which more than 25% account for just manufacturing. So demand should be the enabler. Demand should be the way forward. And capitalizing on technology and should not be coming first as a demand, but it should be coming as a plan for what we need in terms of infrastructure.
Thank you. Do you see some specific sectors of importance for FDI today within infrastructure from the point of your competitiveness? If I may ask you, because we are running out of time, if you could make it very short, please.
Thank you very much. So, okay, in my summary, I would say that we started industrialization attracting FDI way back in 70s. Those days, any manufacturing would be accepted. But we have come now to a stage whereby we are just promoting and accepting investment that is high value add, high in technology, and online businesses only. Meaning multimedia application is very high in importance. So therefore, we also promote the services sector, because when we started, manufacturing was contributing majority to our GDP. But now, services sector has reached about 60% contribution to our economy, and manufacturing has gone down to just 25%. So therefore, the sectors that we are now giving high importance are the multimedia industries, even the logistics industries, which are now done physically or before done physically, are going into online logistics services. And there are Malaysian companies that has formed joint venture with Alibaba, for example, in distribution and logistics. And we are promoting now Malaysia as a principal hub, meaning using Malaysia as a central distribution center for products and services in the region, and being part of the multilateral agreements. This will be enhanced further, especially with RCEP now being negotiated with the failure of TPP. So we are enhancing into the high-tech, high-value-add, multimedia type of industries, and everything that should go online instead of just physical. Yeah?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think for Nigeria, I'll probably speak to the areas where we're focused as an organization. We're focused on both hard physical infrastructure and what we call soft infrastructure. So healthcare is big. I'm sure, most people see Nigerians in the hospitals in India, in Dubai, in London and all that, not because we don't have the doctors, but just because the fiscal investment hasn't been made for some time in a good manner. So it's an area where I think there's a lot of money to be made. We're first focused on agriculture. The typical evolution of economy is agriculture, manufacturing, services, right? But we're doing all of that at the same time, because if I look at agriculture, I'll give you some statistics. Nigeria has over, close to 1 million square miles of arable land. And at the moment, the statistics I have is that we have less than 10,000 tractors in the country. And so agriculture investment is very important. Logistics, storage, warehousing, silos, all of that are areas where I focus on co-investing. The other area for us is free trade zones. Industrial parks. Extremely important, because we're now evolving into light manufacturing as we move into evolving our economy. So that's also an area of focus. And finally, I couldn't say enough about communication infrastructure and IT. With a very young population, this is an area where a lot is happening. I'll give an example. Entertainment and movie making and all this music and all that industry has gone from 0 contribution to the GDP 10 years ago to something north of 3 or 4% of GDP. And I think it has potential to get to 10% of GDP. So those are areas where we think there's opportunity. And then outside of all of that, off-grid power. So I will say, and the advice I'll give, especially in most countries, is look at markets where the end market pays you directly. Avoid markets to a large extent where the government intermediates your payment. That I think is a very delicate area to navigate. But there's enough of those markets for end market direct payments for people to participate.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time. It has been a very interesting discussion. So I would like to conclude, because we said that we started 10 or 15 minutes late. Now we have got 10 minutes left. So I would like to give each of you 2 minutes. And I would like to elaborate upon a little, because that could be also a conclusion or a theme, what you see as the main threats or risks or trends or challenges within today foreign investments in infrastructure. New trends and challenges, eventually risks. And since we started here in the beginning, I suppose that we start with you now and then we take it this way. So each of you have got 2 minutes, and then I will be very rude with you. After 2 minutes, I just stop.
I'll take 1 minute. No, I think the biggest risk we face today is geopolitics.
Sorry, what?
Geopolitics. The world is changing very aggressively, and let's face up to it. There's a rising tide of populism, which may or may not, but I think it will affect the flow of capital one way or another. And I think, let's be real about it. And I'm not advocating one way or another how it's going to end up, but I think that that is the first risk we face. The second, and a consequence upon that, is the fact that a lot of the flow of capital to markets like ours has been partly because of low interest rate environment globally, which has led people seeking for yield and coming to our market. So yes, we are at the tail end of the whip, and we're a little bit concerned, frankly, that as capital reallocation and interest rates starts to rise, things might look a little bit different. However, having said that, the opportunity also is that it's forcing us to look inwards. It's forcing us to look inwards. I look back at my country, and I believe that if we had set up the organization we have today 40 years ago and put $1 billion into it over 40 years, it would be a slightly different proposition today than it is at the moment. So, having said that, that inward look means that we're finding inner resilience in so many areas. And the pitch is, for us, is very simple. There is an opportunity to make a lot of money and create value in our markets. We are hoping and believing that the geopolitical shifts we're seeing, which I don't know how long it's going to last, means that people look at our markets, and I think we create opportunities in these areas that I mentioned. Again, I'll recap. It's agriculture, it's healthcare, it's industrial parks, and it's IT. These are the areas that I think continue to create an opportunity for us.
Thank you, Shem. Thank you so much. 2 minutes for you, Mrs. Baba.
All right. In 2 minutes, I can summarize that the biggest challenge, I think, worldwide is still the politics, the geopolitics, what's going on externally and internally. So in any country, we face these two challenges. Like Malaysia, we have challenges because the biggest investment comes from US and Japan. With Trump administration, there's a bit of challenges because he's calling back all investors to come in and invest back into US. So that could be a challenge, but depends on the infrastructure and the support facilities that we have, whether countries could retain American investment in their countries instead of returning back to America. And then the other one is the internal politics, whether politically it is stable or not, whether the environment of doing business in the country is still friendly, is still attractive for investors to come in, and also the region, the safety of the region, whether it is still there, whether there will be continuity in the safety for investors to come in and to locate in your countries. Basically, those are the things. Of course, each country have to maintain the friendliness in terms of facilities and so on. Yeah. So basically, that's it.
2 minutes.
I believe that the purpose of building infrastructure is primarily for the human kind, and I believe that the challenge is probably we are not focusing as much as we are focusing on infrastructure than what we should be doing for the human capital. I believe that we are in a very racing, fast track where the human capital is challenged by health, by the global warming, so we need to make sure that we build for the future, that infrastructure is built for the future, that we are meeting the demand, not for now, not the immediacy of our needs of today, but looking up to maybe 20, 30 years to come. Because whatever we do now, we are conditioned, but with the future, not with the present. And health should be at the top of it. Education should be at the top of it. And whatever we do for infrastructure, to build infrastructure, should be serving those needs and serving the purpose of humanity, the purpose of rising up to the quality of humanity that we are aspiring for. Thank you.
Thank you.
So really, without repeating what has been said, I would say that from a Middle East region point of view, FDI is here to stay. And this will bring about economic and other reforms in the MENA region, not only because the money is needed, but also because there is a young, educated population which require jobs. And that is effectively forcing the governments in a way, in a very harmonious way, to bring about more opportunities and really making the Middle East a better place to live in for everybody. So I'll just stop here.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the panel so much for your very valuable contributions based on your long experience. I want to now address, of course, to the audience for some questions, and I hope we can take a few questions here. And please, I would be happy if you could please introduce yourself when you raise your question.
Hello, my name is Jabir Walji. I'm associated with Systematic Innovation, UK company. We specialize in innovation.
Can't hear properly. Yeah. Can't hear.
Yes.
Okay, is that clear? Can you hear me? Jabir Walji from Systematic Innovation. We specialize in innovation. I agree with what Imad said, that we have to build the infrastructure for the future. And before we heard comments like we have to have the right infrastructure. My point of view is that the right infrastructure is for that time. What infrastructure was needed in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s and the 90s is very different from what is going to be needed in 2000. Going deeper into the 21st century, I don't see that happening. From my perspective of innovation, we are all talking about smart cities. What the customer wants, which is the foreign direct investment people, if I take this region, I want to get out of the hydrocarbon, I want foreign direct investment coming here, so I want the business people coming here for them to bring the money here. What do the business people want? They want cheaper, better, faster ways of doing business. To me, that is disruption, right? What they are looking for is disruptive cities, not smart cities. Smart city is part of disruptive city, and I don't see that happening. And I don't even see people are thinking on that line, or the vision is there. What is a disruptive city and how we make the disruptive city, or how we make the infrastructure disruptive.
Thank you.
I don't see that in any planning.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think that was very much more of a statement than a question, but a statement. So thank you so much. You have got a question over there. Thank you. Please, we have two. Sorry. Yeah, please, ladies first.
Okay, very quickly. Mr. Orci, thank you very much. Excellent comments. My question is, having had in one of my past lives.
Can you put the mic, towards
Just
your
keep
mouth?
pointed to it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
My past life project finance. You said, okay, we are there, because we are there. It's safer to invest, but that's a notional safety. It's not an insurance. Absolutely. It's like when you have OPIC in something. That's nice. You're not, you're a nice contract which gives you a level of confidence, but it doesn't really. It's not an insurance policy, and I think one has to be very clear on that.
Absolutely. No.
You want to comment? No.
No, that's absolutely correct. I mean, I think, we're taking risk as well. So the fact that, we're with you doesn't mean the investment cannot fail. But it helps to some extent to ensure that if the problem is political.
Shall we have a last question over there?
Thank you very much. My name is Rashid Hashmi.
I hear you badly.
Oh, thank you. My name is Rashid Hashmi from the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Oman. I'd like, first of all, to thank everyone in the panel. It has been very insightful. My question is a bit of a candid question to Mr. Ochi and Mr. Niraj. The investors, where do you see the most competitive PPP structure in the emerging countries, right?
Could you repeat it, please?
Where do you see the most competitive PPP structure in the emerging countries right now?
In the way?
Public,
In
private,
the
Most competitive.
in the emerging countries.
In the
Where do you
emerging
see the
countries.
opportunity, the most sustainable PPP structure right now?
Would you like me to answer?
Thank you. That gives you time for reflection.
I know.
Please. No.
So it's a very good question, and whatever I say is likely to be wrong. So I'll start with that caveat. I would say that rather than answering it for a country, I would rather say it's for a particular industry or a particular situation within a particular, if you like, political geography. Okay, so that's kind of narrowing it down a bit. But as an investor, and this is the public domain, so I have to be careful how I answer it. As an investor, we have been successful and we've also not been successful. So I'd rather give you examples of success, right? And I think in terms of success, I would say Sharjah for us has been a very good place to be in. We've been here for 40 years, and we, in 2005, did 2 projects for $100 million each, which were based on a 15-year return in terms of investment. And we worked with the government in creating the ecosystem to enable that project to happen, and both the projects were very successful. So that's an example of what is I would call a success. I can offline tell you more specific details about both, but I would say that what you see based on the region today is a very, very strong will and desire on the part of the governments, even if the legislative framework is not there, to find a way to create the investment to happen. Okay, so I mean, that's sort of saying it very quickly.
Thank you.
but trying to be helpful.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen.
He asked me a question.
Huh?
So he's pointing at me. No, I think.
I think we have to, okay, perhaps you can take it bilaterally. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, time is flying. So I think thanks to the panel, we have had a very good and very interesting time. I will not try to resume. I will just say that, and to make it very easy for myself, that is that what I've retained when we are talking now about foreign investments in infrastructure, a few things have been said, and that is,
he said for us to stand
it's
out
very
the picture
important
later here.
defining your roles. It is important to be disciplined. It is important to be patient, because you have to do with governments and you have to be friendly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.